G'day and welcome to episode 8 of Travel Pointers, the Australian podcast for frequent flyers. It's the 17th of March 2025 and I'm Matt Green, the editor of Australian Frequent Flyer.
And I'm Wilson McTaggart, a writer at AFF and part of the Frequent Flyer concierge team.
In this episode, we'll explain everything you need to know about redeeming Singapore Airlines KrisFlyer miles. KrisFlyer is a great program with tons of business class award availability in and out of Australia, so it's worth taking a bit of time to get to know how to use it. But first, here is the latest airline travel and loyalty program news since our last episode. Firstly, Dave Emerson has been appointed as the new CEO of Virgin Australia. Previously, the airline's chief commercial officer, Dave's first day as CEO was last Friday. He replaces Jane Herdlicker, who was the CEO for the last 4 years and announced her intention to step down more than a year ago. Qantas has revealed the full extent of its changes to Classic Reward and Upgrade pricing, which takes effect on the 5th of August. The price increases will be between 10 and 20% across the board. For example, the popular One World Classic Flight Reward and Business Class, which you can use to fly around the world, will increase by 20% from 318,000 points to 365,800 Qantas points. Hawaiian Airlines is ending its partnership with Virgin Australia on the 30th of June as it prepares to launch a new partnership with Qantas instead. Emirates is bringing its Game Changer First Class product to Melbourne from the end of this month. Now, that's exciting. This product is Emirates' best first class product that is only found on 9 of its Boeing 777 jets. So it's really quite a rare product, and it'll be an absolute treat for Qantas Frequent Flyer members booking this using their points. Melbourne Airport Skybus has put up its prices again, but the good news is that there is a new free shuttle bus that you can take now from Melbourne Airport to DFO South Wharf, which is about a 15-minute walk from Southern Cross Station in the Melbourne CBD. This bus is put on for free by DFO and it runs from Thursday to Monday. And finally, Qantas has launched a brand new double status credits offer. It's the promotion that a lot of AFF members have been waiting for and speculating about when it's going to start. But it launched last Wednesday and it's running until Tuesday, the 18th of March, which is tomorrow if you're listening to this on the day that we've released this podcast. Now, make sure if you want to take advantage of it that you register first and obviously book by tomorrow, and you can travel up until February 2026 and earn double status credits. Wilson, this is one of the most popular promotions, as I said, on the AFF calendar, and there's a lot of members on our forum who are looking to book some travel for the next year to help them lock in their Qantas status. What are the best itineraries that people can book to make the most of double status credits?
Well, Matt, for starters, it's best to book business class itineraries as they earn a lot more status credits. And ideally, if you can work in a couple of connections as well, this will really boost your status credit earnings, as Qantas awards status credits based on the flights that you take rather than the pure distance of the itinerary. So the best run that we've found from Australia is actually Gold Coast to Auckland via Melbourne round trip. This is about $1,700, which would get you under $3 per status credit, which is pretty good value. However, it's actually slightly cheaper if you start this exact itinerary in reverse from New Zealand. So if you fly Auckland to Gold Coast via Melbourne, it's actually slightly cheaper at around $2.6 per status credit. Auckland in general is a good destination for status runs wherever you are from the East Coast. So if you're departing from Sydney, you can go via Brisbane, or from Melbourne to Brisbane to Auckland is also a good run. Closer to home, there's a nice little status run you can do from Brisbane, take you to Rockhampton via Cairns. This is an economy class, and it'll get you a nice little boost of 50 status credits for $198. If you're out west, you're a little less in luck. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more expensive to fly from Perth, but you can fly from Perth to either Melbourne or Sydney and then on to Queenstown for about $4 to $4.50 per status credit. This isn't a bad run. It's not quite as good as off the East Coast, though. Also, don't forget that you can actually earn status credits on Classic Reward seats if you have Points Club or Points Club Plus. Don't forget that you do need to book Qantas operated flights though, but if you book it through this promotion, you will actually get double status credits as well, which is a nice little boost to your status credit balance if you're looking to retain gold or platinum. Matt, have you looked at booking any status runs?
I will probably book a few. I'm not going to book pure status runs like just, where you fly there and back for the sake of it, but I'll look at incorporating some double status credits into flights that I'm already planning to book, probably something to New Zealand. I think those Auckland runs look pretty good. What about you?
I think my bookings are pretty much sorted for the year, so I don't actually need to. And to be honest, if you don't need to get extra status credits, then probably not a great idea to to waste money just flying for status credits that don't matter.
It's almost blasphemous, but no, I'm kidding. Of course, it doesn't always make sense just to book flights for the sake of it. I mean, in fact, that really doesn't make sense at all. Um, but yeah, like if you are booking anyway, like now's obviously a good time to book. And of course, if you're in Points Club, like we are, then if you need to book any classic rewards, I mean, the price of classic rewards doesn't fluctuate. So if you can book them this week and get double status credits for those, why not? And we do have a full list of some of the best status runs that you can book during the current promotion on the AFF website. And of course, there's a very lively discussion thread on the AFF forum about this promotion. So you can find a link to that in the show notes. Well, Singapore Airlines has almost as many international flights in and out of Australia as Qantas does. It serves most of Australia's main cities with, in fact, multiple daily flights to Singapore in most cases, and generally on wide body aircraft. So, Singapore Airlines does offer a lot of connectivity out of Australia. It markets itself as a great way to fly. Wilson, you've flown with Singapore Airlines, as I have. Have you found it a great way to fly?
Consistently, yes. I absolutely love flying Singapore Airlines, regardless of the class I'm flying. I've done most of my flying on Singapore in an economy, and it's up there with some of the very best economy class flights that I've done. I really, really love the food on board. I
Mm.
think that's probably a highlight. And look, if it's a highlight in economy, then I can only imagine actually what it's like in business class or their amazing first class as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is probably more interesting to me than it is to you, but I also love they have like a cocktail list in economy class. You can get like a Singapore sling or it's all included in the fare. Yeah, consistently good service. Yeah, so I totally agree. It's a great experience. Do you have a favorite flight that you've done with Singapore Airlines?
Yeah, I got the opportunity, I guess. Some would call it a bad experience, but I was able to fly the longest flight in the world, all the way from New York to Singapore. That plane is specially configured just for these long haul flights. It only has business class and premium economy. It was my one premium economy flight with Singapore Airlines so far, and I really liked it. They looked after me throughout the 19 hours. It was a very long flight, as you can imagine. But the big thing for me was that they actually have live TV on a lot of their planes, including the plane that I flew. And I love my live sport. So I just set that up. The Premier League was on at the time. That did me for 7 out of the 19 hours. Got some sleep as well. And then 8. Really, really can't complain. It was a great experience. What about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I remember flying once with Singapore Airlines, just an economy. It was a day flight back from Singapore to Australia. And by the way, I love that you can fly during the day from Singapore to Sydney or Singapore to Melbourne or Brisbane. Like if you fly, as many Qantas frequent flyers would know, Qantas only offers overnight flights back from Singapore to the East Coast. So yeah, it was that's just the fact that they have this schedule choice is really good. But I was flying when the Matildas were playing back when the World Cup was on in Australia, the Women's Football World Cup, and pretty much everyone on the plane was watching the Matildas game. It was like the quarterfinal, I think, and yeah, that was a interesting flight.
I think from memory, that was the game against, I'm going to say France.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that game. Like I was watching it as well back home, and went to a penalty shootout, which we won. And I can imagine that if most of the plane was watching, it was
Oh, I broke out in
celebrations.
cheering.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It was not something you often see on a commercial flight. But yeah, that was nice. My favorite flight though with Singapore Airlines. This might be a little bit controversial, but I redeemed Velocity points a couple of years ago to fly from Darwin to Singapore on their 737 Max. So yes, my favorite flight with them was on a 737, which
the
yeah, a
only
little
narrow body that they have.
yeah. Well, they have some older 737-800. So does that count as a different type? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Anyway, but the reason that I say it's my favorite is like I was one of three passengers in business class on that plane. They have 10 business class seats. They're lie flat, like fully lie flat. I had a throne seat with direct aisle and window access on a narrow body, and the service was just so good. Like really good. I could not fault them. I think I reviewed this flight on AFF and I'm pretty sure I gave them 5 stars because I really had no suggestions on how they could make that a better experience given the route and the aircraft that they were using. And like it didn't feel like it was on a narrow body at all. Like the food was like Singapore hawker center style food, like which I love. But yeah, even like I've flown long haul in economy with Singapore Airlines as well, and it's been consistently great. The seats are comfortable. Like on the 777, they have 9 across seating instead of 10 across, like you have on Emirates or Qatar or British Airways. So yeah, it's a very good experience. The airline itself is great, but the KrisFlyer program is what we're here really to talk about on this podcast. Now, the KrisFlyer program offers some very interesting opportunities for Australians in terms of redeeming points, especially in business class. And we're going to talk all about that after this quick break. New to the world of points or want to level up your game? You can learn even more and improve your travel experience with Australian Frequent Flyer membership. It's completely free to join AFF and participate fully on our lively discussion forums. But did you know that AFF also offers gold and platinum memberships with even more benefits? AFF Platinum members get access to our full library of frequent flyer training courses and can attend all AFF webinars. There's 8 per year that I host. And AFF Gold and Platinum members also enjoy discounts with Qantas Club, Lounge Pair, Frequent Flyer Concierge, and more. For full details or to sign up, visit australianfrequentflyer.com.au or click on the link in the show notes. In general, a lot of Australians seem to collect points with Qantas or with Velocity Frequent Flyer, but there are ways to collect KrisFlyer miles quite easily in Australia, especially if you're using credit cards. Like KrisFlyer is a transfer partner of most of Australia's bank reward programs. So, for example, if you're collecting Amex membership rewards points or NAB rewards points, you can transfer those points over to KrisFlyer. And we'll post a link to an article in the show notes that explains how you can do that and earn KrisFlyer miles with credit cards. You can also transfer points to KrisFlyer from pay rewards. And if you have Velocity points, as a unique feature of the partnership between Velocity Frequent Flyer and KrisFlyer, you can transfer points between both programs in either direction, but there is a little bit of a penalty for doing so. The transfer rate is 1.55 to 1. But that does mean that if you have Velocity points, which you can get really quite easily in Australia, then you do have the option to transfer those over to KrisFlyer and use KrisFlyer miles. I will also mention that at the moment, until the end of March, there is a 20% bonus if you transfer points in the other direction from KrisFlyer to Velocity. But Wilson, you probably shouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, it's not great value, and we'll explain why in a moment in terms of why KrisFlyer miles are so valuable. But to get to KrisFlyer miles, you would have to transfer from somewhere for Australian banks, and the transfer ratio for Australian banks to KrisFlyer is often 3 to 1, which means it's not great value compared to just straight transferring to Velocity.
Which is often 2 to 1, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you do need to often spend a little bit more bank reward points to get KrisFlyer miles, but it could be very much worth it. And that's what we want to talk about in this podcast. So I guess, why would you transfer your points over to KrisFlyer? I mean, the main reason is the great award availability. And when you're redeeming points, or KrisFlyer miles, I should say, on Singapore Airlines flights, there's also no fuel surcharges. So like you can often get like 4, or I've even seen up to 6 business class seats on the same Singapore Airlines flights at a reasonable amount of KrisFlyer miles, and with just the third party taxes and no fuel surcharges. I mean, that's pretty amazing. There are a few quirks though with the KrisFlyer program, aren't there, Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, every program does have its quirks, but KrisFlyer has a few to keep an eye on, I guess. The first one, and frankly the biggest one, is a fixed 3-year expiration of miles based on when you get them into your account. So whenever you might earn them, or whenever you transfer them over from a bank rewards program, they'll expire 3 years later, unless you can pay to extend them, but it's actually quite expensive. This is waived for Singapore Airlines, I guess, elite of the elite PPS Club members. To get PPS Club, you have to fly a lot of business class with Singapore Airlines, so it's probably out of reach for most people.
Yeah, I mean the way to get around that though would just be to transfer if you're collecting points with a bank rewards program, just transfer them in as you need them and then redeem them straight away.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is just a generally pretty good strategy, unless there's a specific reason why you might need to transfer points early, if there's a big devaluation coming or something like that. But it's better to keep points like flexible and transfer them as you need them. Also, if you are stuck with a balance of KrisFlyer miles, we did say before that it's not great value to transfer KrisFlyer miles to Velocity, but better to have some miles than not at all. And so you can transfer your KrisFlyer miles to Velocity if they are expiring, and points don't expire in the Velocity program.
If you have activity, right?
Yes. Another couple quirks of KrisFlyer is you can't transfer miles between accounts except in a specific case, which is from a child account to an adult account, which you set up the relationship, and that costs money still. This is pretty unlike like Qantas and Velocity, which you can transfer points kind of almost willy-nilly, really.
So the implication of that for people, if you for example have like a few KrisFlyer miles in your account and your partner has a few KrisFlyer miles in their account, like with Qantas or Velocity, you could just like transfer them between your accounts and then use them as needed. With KrisFlyer, you can't do that. So like if you have like between you enough points to book an award flight, but individually you don't, you can't actually book the award flight. That's the implication of that.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it makes it a bit hard, especially for example, maybe you take the family to on a holiday somewhere on Singapore Airlines. Like you sign them up to KrisFlyer, which is free to sign up, but then you're stuck with these small balances of miles. The good thing is with KrisFlyer is that you can redeem your miles for anyone. This includes non-family members, which is unlike Qantas. You do have to nominate these people as redemption nominees. You can nominate up to 5 different people. These people can only be changed once every 12 months. So you can't just redeem points for someone and then cancel their redemption nominee status and move on.
So Singapore Airlines does have award charts still as part of its KrisFlyer program, which is really good. So you know exactly how much an award ticket will cost if there's availability. The charts work a bit differently though to the Qantas and Velocity charts.
Yes, that's right, Matt. Singapore Airlines actually use region based charts rather than the distance based charts of Qantas and Velocity. So that means if you're flying between Singapore and Adelaide, you'll actually pay the same price as Singapore to Christchurch. When you go to book Singapore Airlines awards, you'll notice that there's 2 different types of awards you can book. So the first one you can book with KrisFlyer Miles is Saver Awards, which cost less miles, there's less availability, and it does have more restrictions. The other type of award you can book is Advantage, which do cost more miles. However, there is often more availability, there's less restrictions, and you'll also be able to take more advantage of stopovers, which we'll cover later.
Yeah, that's right. And you can also use, of course, your KrisFlyer miles to book flights on any Star Alliance airline as well. Singapore Airlines is part of Star Alliance. This is one of the key benefits as well of being able to transfer your Velocity points into KrisFlyer. You do get access to all those other Star Alliance airlines. Now, when you book a Star Alliance award, you can combine multiple Star Alliance airlines onto the same ticket. That includes combining Singapore Airlines flights with other Star Alliance airline flights onto the same award, but you can only use Singapore Airlines Saver availability, not the Advantage availability, as part of this. And there's also other partner airline awards you can book with KrisFlyer Miles, like Singapore Airlines partners with Virgin Australia, Alaska Airlines, Junior Airlines, as well Virgin Atlantic, although that partnership's ending soon. And you can also use KrisFlyer Miles to book limited economy class routes on Malaysia Airlines and flights between Singapore and Indonesia on Garuda Indonesia. That's a new partnership that just launched a couple of weeks ago. When you use KrisFlyer Miles to book partner airline awards, though, you can only have flights on that one partner as part of your ticket. So, for example, if you wanted to fly Virgin Australia from Hobart to Melbourne and then Singapore Airlines from Melbourne to Singapore, for example, you can't actually do that on the same ticket. You could book a separate Virgin Australia award from Hobart to Melbourne and then separately Singapore Airlines award, but yeah, just not on one ticket. So that's a general overview of how the Singapore Airlines award charts work. But probably what's the most interesting thing to our listeners is availability and sweet spots. So, Wilson, what are some good uses of Singapore Airlines KrisFlyer miles?
I mean, the first one and most obvious one is using it for Singapore Airlines flights, but specifically for Australians, there's great little sweet spots because of the region-based chart. So one of them is on Singapore Airlines from Australia all the way to the Middle East region, which includes Istanbul, and this one you can book for about 100,000 KrisFlyer miles, which is fantastic value.
And that's in business class.
Yes, that's in business class as well. So, I mean, if you're using Qantas Frequent Flyer, for example, you'd get about premium economy for that kind of distance. You can also use KrisFlyer miles to book the new Turkish Airlines flights from Istanbul all the way to Sydney and Melbourne, and vice versa. This is just a little bit more expensive than Singapore Airlines, but we have seen some decent availability as well. So that's business class all the way to Europe for just around 100,000 miles. Again, it's pretty good. Another nice little sweet spot for Australians is Air New Zealand from Australia. Air New Zealand isn't known for its availability, especially in business class. It often doesn't release reward seats to its partners. But if you can find these award seats, you can fly all the way from Perth to Auckland on a wide body plane for 34,500 KrisFlyer miles in business class as well, which is fantastic. You can also do the same trip in economy for just 13,500 KrisFlyer miles.
Yeah, as you say, like the award availability on Air New Zealand is pretty poor, but it does exist occasionally. Like you can sometimes find seats if you go to seats.aero. Like there might be like occasionally seats pop up. I have actually used my KrisFlyer miles to fly from Auckland to Perth in Air New Zealand business class, and that was a good use of miles, I thought. So it is possible, but yeah, availability is not exactly plentiful.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, availability is a very important thing when redeeming miles, but it's nice to know that these sweet spots exist, so you can definitely look for them. Another little niche one, but very useful, is Europe to the Middle East and or return for 33,500 KrisFlyer miles in business class. There's some fantastic products you can fly, like Turkish Airlines business class to Europe, or even Swiss or Lufthansa from Dubai to Europe. And 33,500 miles, 7 hour flight is pretty damn good. And I think you did that recently, didn't you, Matt?
Yeah, now this is one where there's a lot of availability. So this is actually a really useful sweet spot. Yeah, like this is a really interesting little quirk with the KrisFlyer award chart. So we're using here the Star Alliance chart because obviously Singapore Airlines doesn't fly between Europe and the Middle East on its own aircraft. But it actually costs you fewer miles to fly from London to Dubai on Star Alliance as a KrisFlyer award than it does for you to fly from London to Paris, just with the way that the KrisFlyer award charts work, because like an award within Europe is more miles than an award between Europe and the Middle East North Africa zone with KrisFlyer. So that's an interesting one. But yes, I did just a couple of months ago fly Turkish Airlines from no, it was Jeddah in Saudi Arabia to Rome via Istanbul, 33,500 KrisFlyer miles. Interesting flights, very good food with Turkish Airlines. I've also flown like Turkish from Muscat to Amsterdam using exactly the same award. And what else? Oh yeah, Vienna to Kuwait via Cairo in Egypt Air business class a few years ago using exactly the same award. It's one of my favorite uses of KrisFlyer miles actually, and there's usually availability most days that you can book.
I'm surprised I haven't closed it up just because you've used it so many times.
Don't give them ideas. Now, you mentioned before that there's different rules with stopovers. Now, how does stopovers work on KrisFlyer awards?
As I said, it depends on the type of award you book. So if you book an Advantage award, which is the more flexible but cost more miles award, you get one in each direction. So this means, for example, say you're flying from Australia to Europe, you can have a stopover in Singapore on the way out. And then if you book an Advantage award on the way back, you can also have another stopover in Singapore. If you book a Star Alliance award, a Saver award, or just a plain partner award, you only get one per round trip. So you can choose to have your stopover at any point, either on the outbound or the inbound, but you have to make that choice. You can't do both.
Yeah, that's right. And like with the Star Alliance awards, like the routing rules are really allow you to do quite a lot. Now, I will just point out with a lot of the Star Alliance awards, like you can book generally simple point to point itineraries on majority of the partner airlines on the Singapore Airlines website. You do need to select the Star Alliance option on the results page. By default, it will show you when you go to the website and click redeem flights, it'll show you Singapore Airlines flights only by default. But it does let you book, yeah, just sort of basic awards. For most other things, you need to call up probably, especially if you want to combine flights on multiple partner airlines. But there are some pretty cool things you can do, and you don't on a round trip Star Alliance award. You also don't necessarily have to fly back to Australia, assuming you're starting in Australia from the same zone or region. But just to give you an example. And you can also have an open jaw at the origin or the destination as well. So a while ago, I helped someone book an itinerary, which was, and you can also get a maximum of up to 6 flight sectors on a round trip Star Alliance award. So this person booked Perth to Casablanca was the itinerary, and then back from Casablanca to Sydney. So they used an open jaw at the origin. They had a stopover in Johannesburg as well, so using the one free stopover. So they flew Perth to Johannesburg on South African Airways, Johannesburg, Cairo, Casablanca on Egypt Air, then Casablanca to Istanbul on Turkish Airlines, and then to Istanbul, Singapore, Sydney on Singapore Airlines. Now, It was a very good price because it used exactly the same award zone, like Australia to Middle East, North Africa that we just talked about before. Casablanca is in the Middle East, North Africa zone, and it was a little bit complicated to book this over the phone. Originally, the call center told us that it wasn't possible, but eventually they did agree that it was within the rules, and they priced it, and they were able to get the booking, and that was a very, very good use of a Star Alliance award. Really making the most of it, and you can almost book a well. Not almost, you can book a round the world trip even as a Singapore Airlines Saver Advantage Award or as a Star Alliance Award. Um, Even in first class, and like for example, like there's not a lot of saver availability in Singapore Airlines first class, but there often is at least one or two advantage seats if you're a little bit flexible. You could book something like, for example, Sydney, Singapore, New York in first class. And then coming back, you could book, just making this up, but for example, like Los Angeles, Tokyo, Singapore, Sydney as a round trip award. I mean, Singapore Airlines flies from Asia to the US via both Europe and Asia, as well as non-stop options. And you can kind of piece that together. You can use stopovers, use the open jaws, and get yourself a really great trip.
Yeah, so that Singapore to New York, that one's via Frankfurt, is that right?
Yeah, if you book it in first class, it'll be via Frankfurt. The non-stop options, like we talked about before, are only in business and premium. So would be an option if you're doing it in business class, for example. But yeah, and of course, if you're using the Advantage Award, you do get the free stopover in both directions. So you could book, like Sydney, Singapore, Frankfurt, stop over for 2 weeks or whatever, continue to New York, and then coming back, you could book LA to Tokyo, stop in Tokyo, and then Singapore, Sydney. Now, of course, the big thing, other than the pricing and the lack of fuel surcharges on Singapore Airlines flights that makes KrisFlyer attractive, is the availability. Now, if you have tried recently, and we talked about this in the last episode of this podcast, Wilson, but if you've tried recently to find 4 business class seats from Sydney to London on Qantas, or even using Qantas partners, good luck, firstly, but it's basically impossible. And well, it's going to be expensive, but like even getting availability is going to be very, very tricky, and you'll probably end up, if you do find something, it'll probably be a really convoluted routing with lots of stops, and it'll just be messy. With Singapore Airlines, you can often get 4 business class seats on a one-stop itinerary via Singapore on Singapore Airlines using KrisFlyer miles. It's like I've even seen up to 6, like I said before. Like it's really, really a good program for that. Wilson, if you're looking for seats out of Australia, which are the routes to look for which have that great availability?
The flights from Sydney and Melbourne are actually quite decent with availability because they have so many. So Singapore Airlines flies, I think, 5 times daily between Sydney and Singapore, at least on some days. Just pure volume of seats is really good. Another one we've seen a lot of availability on is Cairns to Singapore. That's flown by an A350, so there's plenty of business class seats on, and you can usually find at least 2 business class seats on Cairns to Singapore. Adelaide is not too bad as well. It's really important to be flexible if your preferred point of origin isn't there. Going on from Singapore, you can find flights to popular destinations in Europe, such as Rome, Paris. But these do go first, so you may have to look slightly further afield. Some options might be something like Brussels or London Gatwick, which Singapore Airlines just started flights to relatively recently. If you search London Heathrow, it will only show flights to London Heathrow. So searching for London Gatwick, it will actually show completely different flights. You can also find good business class availability to the US. So Singapore Airlines flies to multiple destinations in the US, both its really long flights to New York and then I guess slightly shorter flights to the US West Coast as well. The other point I will note, and it's not quite business class, but premium economy on Singapore Airlines is quite good. It's offered on a lot of its long haul aircraft. And because you can only book premium economy with either KrisFlyer miles or velocity points at this current time, it's actually quite available. Not many other people in the world can access this premium economy availability. So that's also readily available.
Yeah, the one route that I often, in fact, usually find business class availability on from Australia to Europe with multiple seats available is Melbourne to Frankfurt. And Specifically, the flight that leaves Melbourne around midnight gets into Singapore early in the morning, and then with an onward connection on the daytime flight from Singapore to Frankfurt. Frankfurt is one of those few destinations, I think London and maybe Paris as well, like this, that Singapore operates as daytime services, in addition to their overnight options from Singapore over to Europe. And you can often get availability on that flight. And if you combine it with the Melbourne-Singapore overnight flight, the connections are pretty good, and you can often get multiple seats. So that's my little trick.
Yeah, no, it's a good one, and being able to get that through flight with an hour and a half, 2.5 hours connection in Singapore, it's just fantastic, isn't it?
And Singapore is not the worst airport either.
No, it's consistently rated the best. I think it's just lost its crown to Doha.
Another thing to keep an eye out for is each month Singapore Airlines releases a promotion called KrisFlyer Spontaneous Escapes. And with these promos, you can get 30% off the KrisFlyer miles you needed for travel on certain routes and flights in the following month. So good for planning last minute trips. And in terms of how to book, you can book pretty much all Singapore Airlines awards. So for travel on Singapore Airlines on the Singapore Airlines website, you just need to log into your KrisFlyer account and you can search for availability. As I said before, you can book some Star Alliance and partner awards on their website as well. But you do need to call up for travel on certain Star Alliance partners that you can't book online for more complicated itineraries as well. Like, for example, if you want to book a Star Alliance award that combines Singapore Airlines and a partner, like a Star Alliance partner, you probably will need to call up for that as well. But the good thing is if you call up, you can often book it in relatively easily. And just a little trick here, like if you wanted to fly to somewhere in Europe that Singapore Airlines does not fly to, like for example Lisbon in Portugal, just to pick a place, like if you can find availability on Singapore Airlines into a Star Alliance hub airport like Frankfurt, you can then add on a connecting flight to where you actually want to go in the class of travel that you flew to business on, that you flew to Europe on. So if you're flying business, it can be in business class, and it only adds like 1,000 miles or something. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's a very small amount of miles to the cost of the ticket. So, for example, you could fly Melbourne, Singapore, Frankfurt on Singapore Airlines, and then add on a Lufthansa business class flight from Frankfurt to Lisbon. In this case, for a very low cost, you'll pay just slightly more in carrier charges and taxes for the Lufthansa flight, but definitely worth it, and you'll get all on one ticket. You just have to call up to book that. But if you can find availability on the Singapore Airlines website on the Singapore Airlines leg, and you can see separately availability on the Lufthansa flight, just call up and get it all booked on one ticket as a Star Alliance award. So yeah, that's how you can use your KrisFlyer miles. Wilson, if people are having trouble or want a bit of assistance with this, you do also have the concierge service.
Yeah, that's right. So I work for Frequent Flyer Concierge, and we can help you find flights using KrisFlyer miles. You can reach us at concierge.australianfrequentflyer.com.au and follow the prompts from there.
Well, that's all for this episode of Travel Pointers. We'll be back at the start of April with our next episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take just a moment to leave a rating and a review on your favourite podcasting platform. And of course, you can always give us feedback or suggestions on the Travel Pointers discussion thread on the Australian Frequent Flyer forum. Until next time, happy flying.
Thanks for listening.